is entitled Anandibai Joshee, A Life in Poems. Historical figures have paved the way and serve as an important example that guide us in our everyday lives. Anandibai Joshee, the first Indian female doctor of Western medicine, is one such groundbreaking figure whose life and challenges have represented beautifully in the book titled Anandibai Joshee, A Life in Poems. The Symbiosis Literary Festival joins us for a riveting conversation and book reading event with the writer of the book, Ms. Shikha Malaviya. And to take us through this conversation is Dr. Afshan Majid, Deputy Director of the Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts. May I please invite you on stage? It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Malaviya to you. Shikha Malaviya is the author of Anandibai Joshee, A Life in Poems, a unique retelling of the life of India's first female medical doctor and the first Indian woman to study medicine in the US. Her previous book of poems is Geography of Tongues. Shikha's poetry has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and features in Catamaran, Plume, Swim, and other fine publications. Shikha has been featured as a TEDx speaker and was selected as the Poet Laureate of San Roman, California, 2016. She is a recipient of a Mosaic America Fellowship and is a Writers Grotto member in the San Francisco Bay Area. Speaking with her is Dr. Afshan Majid. Afshan is an assistant professor of history Afshan is an assistant professor of history at SSLA. For a PhD thesis, she studied a 16th century text, Muntakab ut Tawarik, written by Abdul Qadir Baudani. Her work involved recreating the biography of Badwani and reconstructing his narrative to glean a picture of the 16th century courtly culture and society. As an instructor, her efforts are to make history as accessible and enjoyable subject for her student. I now request Afshan to facilitate Ms. Shikha Malaviya.
Okay, the light is so hard, it's hard to see everyone, but I'm assuming all of you are there. This afternoon, we have two very remarkable women with us. One is Anandibai Joshee, and the other is Shikha Malaviya. Before I start the panel, I must say that I have had such wonderful conversations with Shikha backstage yesterday, day before yesterday, about Anandibai Joshee, and there is something so wonderful about women talking about women, women uplifting women, and I hope that all of you enjoy this session as much as I have enjoyed speaking with Shikha. So just one thing, if you have noticed outside there, SSLA has a poetry club called ICBV. It could be worse. And they have a stall outside there. And that stall has some bookmarks. And one of those bookmarks, I was looking at them yesterday. It has a question, and it says, do we ever stop becoming? And I believe that the answer to that is never. We never stop becoming. As Tennyson has said, we are a part of all, I am a part of all I have met. So speaking of two things, speaking of the two remarkable women, and speaking of becoming, I think when I was reading this work, and this is the work I think if I start talking about it, I will not probably finish it in half an hour. Because not only Anandibai Joshee was a wonderful, remarkable woman. If you were to Google her, it would say that the first female doctor of India who traveled to US. That is the statement which is common everywhere. But if you start digging, you will see that there is a very remarkable life there, and that is what Shikha has chronicled. And it's a very unique work because when generally we talk of biographies, we talk of them as, in text form, as very bulky, as very verbose. But what Shikha has done here is that she has very beautifully brought out the life of Anandibai Joshee in poems. So what I would do is Shikha, my first question to you is the format of the book. So how did you come to write this wonderful, beautiful format of Anandibai Joshee's life in poems? Could you tell us about that?
Hi. Okay. First of all, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to the Symbiosis Literary Festival for having me. And this is really special because Anandibai. Well, it's a little controversial, but where she was exactly born. But many people say she was born here in Pune and she passed away in Pune. So I'm really happy to be back in her town. And in Shaniwarwada, I think it's called, if you go there, there is this intersection where the Sangeet Gayan Sabha is. And if you find that building, and it's a very busy street, you will see this blue circle of a plaque which says this was where Anandibai was born and this is where she died. So if you all have a chance and if you're interested in women's history and powerful women, please go and find that plaque and take pictures of it because people don't know about it. There's only one picture on the internet of that. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And so how did I come to write this book in poetry? So first, I'll just speak very quickly about how I discovered Anandibai. So I have a Khichdi upbringing. I was born in England, grew up in the US, and then I went to high school in India. But as a South Asian American, as the label is, I was in the US wondering who the first woman was to come to the United States from India. So when I searched for that online, Anandibai Joshee's picture popped up. And it is one of the most riveting pictures in history I have seen. I encourage you all to search for it. It's very easy to find because it's a picture of Anandibai Joshee in Philadelphia at medical school, where she is sitting very regally, and next to her is a Japanese doctor and a Syrian doctor, all of whom converged in Philadelphia to study medicine in 1883. So just imagine, right? So when I saw her picture, and she had a very Mona Lisa-like glance that literally followed you off the page. And I thought, who is this woman? Why have I never heard of her? So then I dug in, I went down that rabbit hole of research, and the story that I found was so extraordinary. And what was even more extraordinary to me, because I think many of you here in Maharashtra might have heard of her. In fact, let me see a show of hands. How many people have heard of Anandibai? Okay, good. I'm very heartened to see this. But in other parts of India, when I go and I ask that question, there are not many hands, right? So anyway, so as I was saying, so when I discovered this story, it wouldn't let go of me. You know, I thought, how can I write about this? Am I the right person to write about this? Because I'm not from Maharashtra, I'm from Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh, and that too by way of England and the United States, right? So I thought, Ki, am I the right person to do this? And I sort of let the story sit. But it kept on haunting me. I felt like Anandibai was saying, hey, you need to write this, you need to write this. And more extraordinary than her story was also the fact that her story was, in my opinion, and from what I found, almost always told in the lens of her husband. That he was her savior, he was the one who pushed her. In fact, when she came back from the United States to India, all the newspapers proclaimed that her husband's aim of sending her abroad to become a doctor was fulfilled. So where was her own agency? Where was her voice in all of this? And the books that I read, they talked about her childhood, they talked about her education, how her husband pushed her. But when it came to her time in the United States, it almost always just stopped there or short of there. So I wanted to know the whole picture. I wanted to know about her life, her thoughts, what she did, what were her opinions. And so as I did my research, I found some extraordinary documents which were in some archives, such as the Drexel Medical School archives and South Asian American Digital Archives. And her letters were there. Journal entries, things like that. Admission letter she'd written to get admission at the Pennsylvania Medical Women's College, things like that. So I said, this is gold. This is gold, and I want to tell her story. How do I tell her story? Should I write a nonfiction biography? Should I write a novel? And I'd heard about the movie that had come out. I know there were plays about her. But somehow, none of that sat right with me. I wanted to tell the story in her own voice. But obviously, it's an imagined voice. So in a sense, one could say I was channeling Anandibai. And I thought poetry would be the best form because, you can vary the form, which I have done. I've used multiple forms in it. You can tell it in a manner that isn't dry, that isn't boring, that is poetic, which I felt would do justice to all the, turns and challenges and achievements she had in her life. So that's how I came to write it.
Actually, taking something from you, and I was speaking about becoming just now, and you spoke about channelizing Anandibai Joshee. So, since we are having show of hands, is there anyone who has read the work Anandibai Joshee's Life in Poems? Okay, so strong recommendation to everyone. And if you have been in my class, you know that I give very, very strong recommendations, and then I hound you to read those. So this is another one of those. Please read this, because when you will read it, it's in poetic form. There are poems there, which are, various stages of Anandibai's life. Some of the poems are Shikha's imagination. And some of the poems are, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have taken out from, sentences from Anandibai's letters and diaries,
That's correct.
and put them into those poems and, created this very beautiful patchwork of, the life of Anandibai. But when you read, and when I was reading, and I think I went through this book, I think 3 or 4 times, it was every time very difficult for me, or rather, let me put it this way. There were times when I forgot who I was reading, whether it was Anandibai's lines or whether it was your imagination. So that is why I brought up this idea of becoming, Anandibai. So when you spoke of channelizing her,
Right.
I think she spoke. How did you, when you when you're creating, because creating a biography of someone who is not alive.
Right, absolutely.
It's a difficult job because you have very limited resources at your hand. So what was the process of research? How did you, do this to become the voice of Anandibai?
Well, I know this is going to sound a little maybe, cliched or funny maybe, but the truth is when I did decide that poetry is the form I want to choose, I thought, how does one write a life? Sadly, Anandibai had a very short one. She died a few weeks before she turned 21, right? So I thought, this is a life that probably can be told because it's a short life, but it's an extraordinary life, right? And literally, when I did decide, yes, I'm going to do this, I would ask her permission, because what else can you do? She is a spirit, and we're talking about a different type of spirit than the previous panel, right? But she is a spirit, and I wanted to honor that spirit. I wanted to honor her strength, her resilience, her intelligence. So I, on my own, just because I felt it was the right thing to do, would look up and say, Anandibai, what do you want me to write today? And that's what I did for each poem that I approached. I tried to approach it in a linear manner, so it's from birth to death. And if you don't mind, I'll probably share some poems so you can get a sense of...
That was my next request, so please go ahead.
Yeah. And the thing is, yes, many times it has happened that people think I have collected Anandibai's poems and put them in this book. But that is not the case. I have written the books. I've written the poems, I've taken some creative liberties, but wherever I could put in her voice, the spirit of her voice, I've done that. I've tried my best. Yeah. So, okay, so Anandibai Joshee she grew up in a place called Kalyan, which is a suburb of Mumbai now. And, okay, we have some Kalyan people here, it seems. So anyway, I wanted to establish, especially for people who are not familiar with Maharashtra and Kalyan, and that time period, what it was like. So at that time, women, I mean, she was born into a Brahmin family, which had fallen on hard times. So they lived in genteel poverty. But nevertheless, she was privileged. She had a nice, comfortable upbringing. But the women always stayed at home. In fact, and this is a very significant thing, women did not wear shoes because they didn't need to, because they were not going out. So, which was the case with Anandibai, because it created a huge ruckus when she started going to school and wearing shoes, actually, right? Everyone made fun of her. They laughed at her. But anyway, this poem is called Outside the Chaukat, and this is in Kalyan, Maharashtra, 19th century. If you want to know what happens in this bustling town by the sea, Kalyan, which in Sanskrit means well-being, but whose shores have thrice been plundered by the Mughals, the Portuguese, and the British, despite the shade of a fortress and a long city wall with 4 gates and 11 towers, whose welfare is erased and renamed Kalyan and Kalyan. Ask the men, for they are the ones who wear shoes that take them outside the chaukat. They are the lucky ones who, donning their turbans, smell the dung of many homes, hear the hum of horses' hooves, darken their hands with the ink of newsprint, read the cover of the day while sitting on a zopara in the courtyard, dragging a puff from a gurgling hookah. Whereas the women tiptoe softly, their bare soles hardened, walking from kitchen to cowshed to well, fingertips charred from stoking the chulha, thoughts spilling over like water from vessels balanced on their heads, of what lies beyond a door frame that make us splash and then evaporate. So maybe I'll just share a few more. So this is written as if she is, not this poem, but the other poems are written as if she is speaking. So, Anandibai grew up in a household where she was the middle child, and she used to play kushti with her brothers, and they didn't pay too much attention to her since she was the middle child. But suddenly, at the ripe old age of 7 or 8, her parents were very worried. Why isn't she married yet? What are we going to do? We need to find a boy for her. And so suddenly, from being this carefree child, she was thrust into all of these domestic responsibilities. So this poem is called To Touch the Sky, 1873. The sun's shadow swept over my face as I built biceps, drawing water from the well, rope burns on my hands and wrists. And when I complained, there's no time to play, Ai's anger drew welts on my back. Her orders a daily refrain. Gather sticks for the chulha, scrub the pakshala. So when I found the zopara empty, I grabbed its chains as if a horse's reins, pumping my legs furiously to see how high I could go. Braids flying, skirt rippling, sun winking, toes trying to touch the sky. My only witness, a green pigeon whose wings I conspired to steal. So Anandibai, she was 8 years old. Her parents were really worried. They wanted to find a good boy for her. And they found someone who was 16 years older, who was widowed. And he didn't even show up on the wedding day because he didn't want to marry her. His name is Gopal Rao, and he was a reformer of sorts, and he wanted to find a widowed woman to marry. And he didn't show up because Anandibai wasn't widowed. But since he couldn't find one, he came back and said, okay, fine, I'll marry your daughter, only on the condition that I can educate her. So her parents were horrified because they didn't want to, they didn't want her to be educated because that meant going out of the house, and then if she developed modern ideas, what might happen next? So they said yes, but they also said no. That yes, you can marry her, but no, we don't want, her to be educated. And yet, that's exactly what did happen. But her journey was one that wasn't easy because Gopal Rao, although he was considered progressive, he was a violent man. He would beat her, and nobody talks about this in her story, how he would beat her with sticks until her skin started swelling. And this is documented. She herself has shared this in letters. And, later on, when she was older, still in her teens, but very wise, and when she was in the US, she even wrote back to Gopal Rao that, what you did to me was unfair. This is not right. But eventually that would lead her to becoming a doctor. And so, I don't know, should I share more about that, or do you have any?
Definitely. As you were talking about this, I was thinking of, the context in which Anandibai is. It is the 19th century in India. It is the century of reformist movements and revivalist movements where we have, Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj, and we have these stellar women. And Anandibai is in stellar company with Pandita Ramabai, who is her cousin,
Right.
and also Savitribai Phule. Incidentally, we saw a becoming yesterday with Sushma Rana Day and Savitribai Phule, and how wonderful it is that we are seeing another, two ladies here. So that is the context in which Anandibai is living. And at this point of time, there is this very interesting statement that a historian, Tanika Sarkar, makes. And she says that women and their bodies at this point of time in the 19th century in India are becoming sites of politics between the British Raj and the men. That what do you do with them? So these men who are now getting educated or are moving towards Western education are now, they call it, Tanika Sarkar calls it a top-down reform, something that the man decides to give to the woman, that, okay, she needs this reform and I will be the savior and I will
Exactly,
be the,
exactly.
the hero of her life. And this is the issue with Anandibai's life as well, that her life is seen as, what is bestowed upon her by her husband, and her journey is not talked about. So could you talk
Exactly.
about that a little bit?
Sure, sure. So I think at that time, it is safe to say that a lot of men were in love with the idea of reformation without understanding exactly what it was. And in the case of Gopal Rao, if you look at what his interests were, he wanted to go and study in the West, but he ultimately realized he wasn't good enough. And when he realized he wasn't good enough, at least maybe somebody under him, like his wife, could fulfill his dreams and his desires. But that wasn't exactly what happened. What happened is that Anandibai became pregnant when she was around, well, now this again is debatable whether it's 12 or 14, but she became pregnant, she had a child, she gave birth, it was a boy, and within 10 days it died. And now the reason why that happened, speaking of being caught between Indian and European men, is that women were too scared to go to a proper doctor. And the reason is because they were men, and all of them mostly European men, right? So when Anandibai lost her child, she realized this. She realized that all of this could probably be prevented, or much of it could be, if there were women doctors. And at that time, there were no women doctors, not even Western doctors. And I think some nursing courses had just started. but there was no such concept as a woman doctor at the time in India. So that's when Anandibai resolved that she wanted to be a doctor. Her husband did not tell her to be a doctor. Nobody else told her to be a doctor. She, on her own, decided because of the loss of her child that she wanted to be a doctor. And I wanted that to be very clear in this book. I wanted it to be her story. So, maybe I could share a poem, from that.
Yes. I think one poem from one stage of her life would be wonderful.
Okay, so this poem is called Loss and Invocation in 1877. On the 11th day, we were to name you with careful consideration. Moon sign, birth month, family deity, touching your tongue with honey, that you should speak sweet. A black thread tied around your wrist to ward off unfriendly glances. But the only ceremony left is mourning. 10 days you suckled, then went still, and my breasts that leaked every 2 hours in memoriam grow hard and cold. This humility that keeps us indoors is what killed you, my son, what kills our own. Shying from a doctor's touch, another man's, we grieve under the shade of our saris as men go about their daily business. And through your loss, I find purpose, my son with no name, birthing a dream. And I volunteer myself to my countrywomen as I take the oath of Hippocrates to help and heal, to do no harm, to don the white coat only men have worn.
That's wonderful. I think then she reaches US.
Well, so what happens is her husband does want to help her, and he does. We have to acknowledge the helper it is. So he writes a dozen letters to all these missionaries. He's ready to convert to Christianity. He's like, we should do whatever it takes. And he really wanted to go to the West as well. And Anandi said, no, I'm not going to convert to Christianity. I want to stay Hindu, even though I respect Christianity. But call it serendipity, call it karma, call it luck. A woman in New Jersey in a dentist's office while waiting for the dentist is flipping through a magazine called the Missionary Review, where she reads a letter that Gopal Rao has written to this person named Mr. Wilder. And that is printed in that magazine, where he wishes for his wife to somehow get to the United States to become a doctor. And so Theodosia Carpenter is this woman's name, is really affected by it and says, hey, this is another woman in another country. I want to help her somehow. So they correspond for 3 years and share information about their cultures. And their letters are so beautiful, so beautiful. Some of them have been printed in excerpts in Meera Kosambi's book, The Life and Letters of Anandibai Joshee. So, you see this exchange between two women who just want to know about each other. And it is through Theodosia that Anandibai ultimately gets to go to the United States, and she has a family waiting for her. In 1883, can you imagine traveling all alone, not having money, trusting? And that's one thing about Anandibai. She had so much faith and confidence that whatever will happen will be good. So she trusted this person like a second mother. And so that's how she ultimately ended up in the United States, alone, without her husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she calls Mrs. Carpenter as Maushi,
Maushi, yeah.
The sister of the mother, and she says that I got motherly affection from her, which she incidentally did not get from her own mother, because
Right.
her own mother was a little cruel towards her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact reasons why. Maybe because she was the middle child, or maybe she was a girl versus a boy. But she and her mother had a very difficult relationship, and she's written a little bit about that too. But towards the end, as Anandibai was dying, it seems that they sort of, I think in a way, they patched things up, and she died on her mother's lap. Yeah, so so in Theodosia Carpenter, she found a second mother. She found so much love that I was so shocked when I found this out. When Anandibai died, she died of tuberculosis. She was cremated here in Pune, but her ashes, and this is per Anandibai's request, her ashes were sent to the United States to be buried in the Carpenter family cemetery. So there's a headstone in Poughkeepsie, New York, which has Anandibai's name on it. And so her ashes rest there. That's how much she loved being in America. There's a reason for that. When she went to the United States, she was free from expectations from her husband and expectations from her mother and other women in Indian society. She really discovered who she was. And it's that empowerment is what really blew me away. If you read some of her words, so you know how we have autograph books in which you write favorite color, favorite flower. So there was a similar autograph book like that, which she signed in her host's home. And there is one line in there, and that one line just, sold me that this woman is incredible. She's one of India's first feminists, that this woman really knew who she was. So the question was, if you could be somebody else, who would you be? And you know what she said? Anybody? Can you guess what she said? No, she said no one. That's how sure she was of herself. So things like that made me realize that her life story needs to be heard by everybody. When her community, so she traveled from Kalyan to Kolhapur to Serampur to Calcutta. Her husband was a postmaster, and in order to make sure she got an education, he transferred wherever she could study. So it is from Serampur or Calcutta where she came to the U.S. But she had to give a huge speech in front of a hall like this, where she had to convince society over there why I go to America. Because everyone thought she's crazy, she's going to bring disdain to our community. If she crosses Kala Pani, she will be impure. Things like that. These are the types of challenges she had to battle, among other things. So she was an incredible woman.
So can I request a favorite to read?
Yes.
And it is incidentally the same one which you just mentioned.
Oh.
A mental photograph.
Sure.
This portion, it is 47. I've opened it for you. Take this one.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful.
I've put a bookmark there because I had made a point that I would request you to read this one.
And it's one of my favorite poems because, so this is called a found poem, where I've taken Anandibai's words and turned it into a poem, right? So, yes, this is written in Mrs. Theodosia Carpenter's autograph book, September 3rd, 1883. And so the first stanza I've written in as her. I was ravenous, shoving the open mouth of my mind with morsels of knowledge held by my husband's hand, that after crossing 2 oceans, when I should be asked in the parlor of my sponsor, a kind American woman whom I call Maushi, mother's sister in my native tongue, but whose love is like a mother itself, what my favorite things are, I am truly overcome with joy. No one has ever asked this of me, not even I. And so I write in the album of Mrs. Theodosia Carpenter of Roselle, New Jersey, ever so carefully, answers that introduce me to myself.
Thank you. Reading this gave me goosebumps because the way she's saying, that no one has ever asked this of me, not even I. Even I have not thought about, myself of what is it that I like, what is it that I dislike, and that is such an important journey of discovery that she goes on to. And I think one conversation that we were having about, when she's thinking about trying out corsets, trying out Mrs. Carpenter's dresses. Could you tell about that?
Well, actually, so this woman was so incredible, this young woman. when she went to New York, she was first in New York and then Philadelphia in 1883. Her host, all of them were really fascinated by Indian culture at the time. Exoticism was at a real high, but also they wanted to know what type of food did they eat, what type of clothes did Indians wear. So Anandibai hosted a traditional Maharashtrian style meal in which she, they didn't have banana leaves, so they took buttonwood leaves, right? And she cooked like 7, 8, not 7, 8, sorry, I think 14 or 15 different dishes. Mrs. Carpenter's family, all the women and her friends, Anandibai gave her saris to them, so that they could all wear her saris and while they had the meal. She made everybody sit on the floor. She made everybody eat with their hands. This is in 1883 in Roselle, New Jersey. So that's the kind of strength she had. She wasn't afraid to introduce others to her culture. But when I learned this, I also tried to imagine, well, if she was teaching them about our culture, I'm sure she was also curious about their culture, and she must have felt that she too, might try on a dress or something like that. So when she was leaving for the US and her husband couldn't come to keep an eye on her, he said, listen, do what you have to do. If you have to change, so Anandibai refused to wear Western clothes. So he said, if you have to change how you wear your sari or your palla, it's okay. If you have to eat meat, eat meat. So she didn't do those things, but she started eating egg, and she just changed the way she wore her palla, and she sent her husband a photograph, and she told him, I've started eating egg. He got extremely upset. He said, you've forgotten your Indian roots, you've forgotten your Indian culture. So that is the type of stuff she had to deal with, So reformation, yes, but also no.
Yes, so far away, but still worried about the husband's gaze when
Absolutely.
Yes, that's a very important thing to see how she's growing up. And there's one thing that I found in your poems, and this is something that I think we also spoke about, that every one poem progressively is a journey of her maturity.
Absolutely.
And she makes a statement about marriage. We are.
So
please.
So when she was
leave it to you.
corresponding with Mrs. Theodosia Carpenter, Mrs. Carpenter asked her about arranged marriages and child marriages. So one quote really stands out. And at the time, Anandibai must have been maybe 15. She said, and again, just think of this 15-year-old child in 19th century India. She wrote to Mrs. Carpenter, we marry before we know what it is for. Just imagine. So things like that just really pierced through,
Yeah.
But
So young, yeah.
I was thinking maybe I could share another poem. What do you think?
Sure. And then after that, we can have one question from the audience. I got a time chit.
So, the poem which I'd like to share is when she's in medical college, right? The poem where she considers a stethoscope like a Mangal Sutra. Yeah. But give me a minute to find it, unless you can find it before me. Yeah. Found it. So back in the day, I found out that stethoscopes were composed of ebony, ivory, and silk. So I thought that's so beautiful, right? And then I also thought, well, wow, stethoscope could be a piece of jewelry, couldn't it? So to be a doctor, the symbol at that time, and still now, you associated with a white coat and a stethoscope, right? So ebony, ivory, and silk, 1884. Over my doctor's white coat and the black beaded Mangal Sutra that lays snugly against my chest as proof of marriage. Tips of ivory in each ear, connected by tubes wrapped in fine silk, forming a parabola, a conduit of sound, from which hangs an ebony medallion, confirming proof of life through the steady gallop of beating heart and burbling lungs. And I wonder how this is not considered a type of precious jewelry as well, the stethoscope worn by a rare few of my sex.
Thank you so much. And now I think you realize why I am highly recommending this book, that you all should read it to take the journey, of Anandibai Joshee through poems. And I think we can take one question from the audience. Oh, okay, lovely. We've just been granted more questions. So, okay, can we have questions from the audience? Anyone who wants to? Yes, please. Kritika.
Good evening, ma'am. First of all, it was a great session, very informative.
Thank you so much.
My question is, I recently watched the Marathi film Anandi Gopal, and I thought that it was very focused, laser focused on the husband, Gopal Rao, and Anandibai's journey wasn't really touched upon in a thoughtful way enough. Like there was a lot of sympathy given to the husband, not enough to Anandibai. So I was wondering, when it comes to stories of women who have had men as milestones in their life, how do we balance the storytelling in a way that is not totally ignoring the men, but not also lionizing them over the women themselves? Thank you.
That's an excellent question. And, I didn't want to portray Gopal Rao as a horrible person, but at the same time, I wanted to tell the truth. So in this case, I really tried to adhere to the truth. There were times where you could tell that he obviously cared a lot about his wife. But on the other hand, and this isn't the book, but I didn't want to put too much of him because I really wanted it to be about her. He was selfish. It was for him to feel good about himself and for a means for him to get to the US, which he did eventually. He came for Anandibai's graduation, but he didn't go straight to her. He went and lectured all over the United States talking about what a great civilization India is and how horrible the West is. And so he also, Anandibai was so embarrassed and she was so afraid. And these were some of her insecurities, which she even told to her host. She was scared that he was going to come after this big tour. But so I didn't put that in, I've mentioned that. But to answer your question, it is a delicate balance. But when you are telling a story of powerful women who face adversity, you have to tell the truth. That's the only way. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, there we have a question. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the insightful session. My question is, since you've written the biography in a form of a poem, how difficult was it to compile it, and what was the process behind it? Because writing a biography as a biography is a different kind of a genre, and writing a biography in the form of a poetry is a very different sort of a, medium. So what processes, how did you compile, how did you research? Is that my question?
Thank you. That's a great question, and I love talking about process. So I took a couple of years to amass all these details about Anandibai's life, and at the end of the book, I have a bibliography in which I've cited my sources. In fact, the two main books that I used for each poem where there's actual facts that I can connect, I've put the page numbers and things like that. But it did take a lot of time. I was very lucky, incredibly lucky, that I found a biography written by an American woman who knew Anandibai, and within a year of her passing, wrote the book, which had descriptions of encounters with Anandibai and things like that. So that book was like gold. That was like, when an archaeologist excavates and they find, something, it felt like that. So I tried to find as many instances as I could. But why poetry? I think, poetry is, a lot of it is maligned based on, some of the poems we've been taught, written by dead British lords and stuff like that. But poetry is actually such a malleable genre. And especially in this day and age where we're so used to social media, text, tweets, and all of the visuals we see, poetry is very brief. You can pack in so much in stanzas. And at the same time, you can really experiment within it. It's a very interesting genre. It's like, clay. You can mold it in many ways. So, a person's life is never static. There's so many different things that happen, and there's so many different forms in poetry. So I thought it would be the perfect medium to tell her story and to use different forms. So I've used like couplets, I've used ghazal, I've used found poetry, I've used pantoums. So I've used all sorts of different forms in the book to capture her life. And and I'm always constantly, as a poet, trying to push the boundaries of the genre. I don't believe in being a purist when it comes to language. I feel experimentation, necessitates invention. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, thank you. Can we have just one last question? Thank you so much. Both of you are being, generous and polite towards each other.
Hello, ma'am.
Okay.
My question is, if you were to describe Anandibai in one word, what could it be?
In one word, equanimity.
Thank you. That was really short and sweet. And I think with that, we will, wrap up this session. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for talking
It's been
to
a
us.
pleasure.
There's so much more that I wanted to talk to you, and I'm sure they as well. But I think we can continue the conversation off the stage. Thank you so much.